WADR, promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar. Good evening and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide on WADR.org. This is Newslink. Here are the top stories. Islamic clerics in Côte d'Ivoire call for an inclusive and transparent election come October 2025. The Senegalese Human Rights Commission urges professionalism in review of the controversial amnesty law. Ghana's Chief Justice, in the face of imminent dismissal, demands copies of petitions seeking her removal.
It may be premature for the member of parliament to go to court at this stage, because I don't know what actually the act of the president, which is ultra vires, or which, if he does, would tend to prejudice the right of the CJ.
And some aggrieved supporters of the ruling party of Liberia demand jobs after unfulfilled promises.
We are peaceful people. We don't want chaos. Many of us are here. We are national security officers. Some are from different backgrounds. You don't know. So if they continue doing this to us, then they are seriously telling the international community that Liberia is not a peaceful country.
Details of these stories and more coming up shortly.
Here is Abdullahi Hassan with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast and a warm welcome to our listeners in Gambia, Ghana, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. Newslink begins in Côte d'Ivoire, where imams are calling for peaceful elections a few months ahead of the presidential election in October. The clerics are following in the footsteps of the Catholic bishops who made a similar call last week. The Ivorian Superior Council of Imams is also calling for dialogue and tolerance to avoid confrontation and division. Let's join Augustine Coley for the details.
This call was made during the celebration of the Night of Destiny at the Grand Mosque of Rivera Gulf in eastern Abidjan. The Higher Council of Imams, Mosques and Islamic Affairs calls for a shift away from hate speech and division just months before the presidential election. For the council, everyone has a responsibility to preserve peace in the country. Dialogue and tolerance must be fostered between stakeholders, according to COSIM, which believes that peace is the foundation of all development. The organization also calls for ensuring security during the elections scheduled for next October. Several high-level government officials attended this night of prayer, notably Ivorian Vice President Chemoko Melaid Kone and General Fagondu Jomande, Minister of the Interior and Security. Speaking, the latter invited religious leaders to increase their prayers for the country.
Augustine Coley reports in there. Meanwhile, the Senegalese government is being called upon to use the human rights approach as it sets out to review the amnesty law adopted by the immediate past administration of Macky Sall. The call was made by the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights during a high-level meeting organized by the National Human Rights Commission of Senegal. The office says while it welcomes peace and reconciliation, perpetrators of human rights violations should be prosecuted. Sankule Janko has more.
The amnesty law enacted by former President Macky Sall-led government pardons security officials who reportedly committed human rights violations in the build-up to the presidential elections in 2024. In addition, the law guaranteed the freedom of President Bassirou Diomaye Faye and Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko, who were both at the time in prison. As the Senegalese government set to review the law, the West African Regional Office of the UN Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights Representative Robert Kochani urges the government to use the human rights approach in addressing the amnesty law.
We are strongly advocating for a human rights-based approach to be used across the board when it comes to this issue of amnesty law.
The UN envoy welcomes the peace and reconciliation efforts, but warns that justice must be served for victims and their families by prosecuting perpetrators.
You need to ensure that the amnesty law is not perceived or used to pave the way for impunity. The amnesty law should not be used to let a police officer or a gendarmerie officer who has killed with no reason with his rifle demonstrators to just walk free and think that he or she can do it again at the next occasion.
While calling for reconciliation, Babakar Njai, a peace and security expert at the Timbuktu Institute, insists that heinous crimes should not be overlooked.
Look into serious crimes that happen that need not to be just brushed under the carpet, but we can find other ways to go into that, have reconciliations, have transitional justice, people accepting their crime they committed and ask for apologies.
Meanwhile, the Human Rights Commission of Senegal has urged the parliament to engage the Constitutional Court for the best solution.
A report filed in by Sankule Janko. Now, the Gambian government has engaged the Islamic Republic of Mauritania over rising concerns about the well-being of Gambian migrants in the country. Banjul, in his statement, announced that a delegation was dispatched to Nouakchott to clarify the report and subsequently activate mechanisms for the protection of migrants in the transit country. Christopher Ticho completes the story.
In an official statement, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, International Cooperation and Gambians Abroad announced the dispatch of a special envoy to Mauritania to strengthen the protection of its nationals. According to the document, the Gambia is closely following the evolution of the situation of Gambian migrants in Mauritania with the greatest interest and concern. The Gambian embassy in Nouakchott has been instructed to intensify its exchanges with relevant Mauritanian authorities and strengthen its interactions with the Gambian community to ensure the protection and promotion of their well-being. In this spirit, Gambian authorities are inviting all their nationals in Mauritania to register with the embassy to facilitate communication and administrative procedures. They are providing them with contact numbers should they need assistance.
Christopher Tichu with that report. Meanwhile, the Malian government has expressed its indignation at the violence suffered by its citizens expelled by neighboring Mauritania in recent weeks and called for an immediate end to this flagrant violation of human rights. Recall, for several weeks, Mauritania has been carrying out a campaign of expulsions of migrants, particularly Senegalese, Malians, Ivorians, and Guineans, provoking strong criticism in the region. According to the Minister of Malians living abroad, Moussa Ag Athar, more than 1,800 Malian migrants have been expelled from Mauritania in recent weeks. The minister assured that measures were taken from the beginning of the events for the protection and support of Malians. A Malian delegation led by Foreign Minister Abdoulaye Diop visited Nouakchott on Thursday afternoon, where he was received by the Mauritanian President Mohamed Ould Cheikh Ghazouani, according to the Mauritanian Information Agency.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
As a reminder, we're live on WADR.org. In Ghana, the Chief Justice has formally written to President John Mahama requesting copies of the petitions filed against her as part of the ongoing process for a possible removal. Gertrude Saki Tokono's request, outlined in a letter to the President and the Council of State, comes as legal and constitutional debates intensify over the handling of the petitions. From Accra, Nadiri Tete reports.
Ghana's Chief Justice Gertrude Saki Tokono has requested copies of the 3 petitions submitted to President John Dramani Mahama seeking her removal from office. In a letter dated Thursday, March 27, 2025, she appealed for access to the documents, stating that she requires at least 7 days to review them and issue a response before any committee of inquiry is set up. Her request follows President Mahama's decision to forward the 3 petitions to the Council of State for consultation in accordance with Article 146, Clause 6 of the 1992 Constitution. However, Justice Tokono maintains that she has yet to receive copies of the petitions which form the basis for the removal process. She cited the Supreme Court case of Ejechum versus Attorney General and Akwete, arguing that before the President consults the Council of State, there must be an opportunity for the Chief Justice's response to be considered alongside the petitions. She stressed that such a step is in line with constitutional procedures for the removal of justices. Meanwhile, the process has been challenged in court. Vincent Asifua, the NPP Member of Parliament for Old Tafo, has filed an injunction application at the Supreme Court questioning the legal basis of the removal proceedings. Represented by former Attorney General Godfrey Adame, Asifua contends that the Chief Justice must first be alerted of the petitions and allowed to respond before the President can consult the Council of State. However, a constitutional lawyer, Raymond Bidema, believes that the suit by the MP may be premature.
In my opinion, it may be premature for the Member of Parliament to go to court at this stage, because I don't know what actually the act of the President, which is ultravari, or which, if he does, would tend to prejudice the right of the CJ in this circumstance, and for which reason he has to go to court.
The Supreme Court is set to hear the case on April 2, 2025. For WADR, Nadiri Tete, Accra.
Let's take you to Nigeria, where several civil society organizations have demanded transparency in the appointments of officials to the Independent Electoral Commission. Speaking at an engagement ahead of the appointment of officials of the Electoral Management Body, especially that of Chairman Mahmoud Yakubu, whose tenure ends by December 2025. According to the Executive Director of the Policy and Legal Advocacy Center, Clement Nwanko, it will serve the interest of the nation if these officials resign ahead of the expiration of their tenure to ensure a smooth transition.
Quite a number of national commissioners are going to be due for completion of their term in only a few months. But left to me, I would actually even suggest, and this is not born out of anything other than national interest, that those whose tenures in INEC is due to expire, I think October or November, should actually resign ahead of that date. And this has nothing to do with anything other than really to provide the opportunity for new memberships of the commission so that they will have enough time to prepare for the 2027 general election.
Clement Nwanko, Executive Director of the Policy and Legal Advocacy Center of Nigeria. Elsewhere in Liberia, supporters of the ruling Unity Party Thursday staged a peaceful march outside President Joseph Boakai's residence, voicing their frustration over unmet job promises made during the recent election campaign. Many of these demonstrators were part of the security teams that protected President Boakai during his campaign from 2017 until his election in 2023. The supporters, who have expressed their growing concerns about the lack of employment, argue that their efforts and dedication during the campaign have gone unrecognized. Holding banners and chanting slogans, they called on the president to fulfill his commitments and provide jobs for those who stood by him during his rise to office. The Unity Party, which had long touted job creation as a key pillar of its platform, is now facing increasing pressure from its base to deliver on this promise.
When we came here, we do our peaceful assembly. Never engage anybody. We never beat on anybody but police people. As you can see on me, I was flogged by the police officers who only calling the attention of the hierarchy to come and receive our plaque so that the president can know that we are not working. The police officers we have in Liberia, then that some of them, they are not professionals. Very arrogant on us. Child gave them instruction that they should flog us. We are peaceful people. We don't want chaos. Many of us are here. We are national security officers. Some are from different background. You don't know. So if they continue doing this to us, then they are seriously telling the international community that Liberia is not a peaceful country. We are 305 men. During the struggle, we lost our family members. Yes. I lost my 2 children just because of Joseph Boakai. Some people lost their properties. So is it the way that Joseph Boakai intends to pay us? So we are asking the president, why have we done to him that he's treating all like this when there was no national security to protect him? We were only need a ring, and he was having a higher protection. Yes. He was having a higher protection during the campaign period, so that they pay the guy for us, and the international community must come into the case. If they not come into the case, the next people assembly will be at the embassy of the United States. We'll do that, and we will not relent. Anywhere we go, let them continue beating us.
A member of the aggrieved supporters of the Unity Party of Liberia. You are listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM, Dakar, Senegal, and online on wadr.org. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Islamic clerics in Cote d'Ivoire call for an inclusive and transparent election come October 2025. The Senegalese Human Rights Commission urges professionalism in review of the controversial amnesty law. Ghana's Chief Justice, in the face of imminent dismissal, demands copies of petitions seeking her removal. Ahead in the news, we do have the guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
A 3-day forum organized by the West African Civil Society Institute, WACSI, in Dakar, Senegal, on declining democratic practices and shrinking civic space concluded on Thursday with a pledge from participants to demonstrate solidarity and resilience to strengthen freedom of expression. The 72-hour WACSI discussion also focused on issues related to the freedom of action of citizen movements and civil society organizations in West Africa. The assessment reveals that civic space is shrinking and political leaders are adopting the same practices aimed at consolidating their power. However, civil society is not united enough to counter the threats to its scope of action. Here is Omolara Balogun, representative of the director of WACSI, at the closing ceremony.
The first objective of this workshop has been totally achieved, and we really appreciate that. Now we have ideas, we have insight, hearing from social movement actors and civil society and activists on what it means, the reality of their space, the dynamics, how we need to understand and, understand what we had in mind concerning the work that they do. And I think this is very important. The second thing for us, which has been greatly achieved, is actually having, undiluted information about the status of civic space across the different countries that are present here. And that's why we were very strategic in our selection of people that would be at this very first workshop of social movement and activists working within the space. And I believe that you'll agree with me that what our colleagues have shared with us in confidence over the past 3 days is nothing compared to the misinformation and the disinformation that is out there. Now, many of us have had, a mental shift of how we view the most challenging and complex context that people are coming from, beyond what the mainstream media, are sharing, beyond the populism, ideas outside there that we are reading.
Omolara Balogun, representative of the director of WACSI, speaking there. Before the guest interview, let's bring you a special report about Niger's struggle to tackle food insecurity, a crisis that reached its peak in 2022, affecting several million people. Today, millet processing plants have emerged to address the food crisis. This is the case in Isa, a town in the Maradi region near the border with Nigeria, where women are busy processing millet into fortified children's flour. Here's a report by our Niamey correspondent Mutala Zuberu and presented by Eche Atisu.
A factory and a few pair of hands to contribute to the fight against food insecurity. These women are completing the first stage of processing millet into fortified children's flour. They are thus contributing to strengthening the nutrition of the region's children. Nadia Chaibo is one of the workers.
This flour made from local products has many advantages, especially for children, because it provides them with a lot of vitamins. It has many nutritional benefits.
This flour, made from a local commodity, has many benefits, especially for children, because it provides them with many vitamins. It provides significant nutritional benefits. A production and training unit made operational by the World Food Programme. The workers produce approximately 2 tons of flour per week under the supervision of Alima Abachi, the factory manager.
So if the women who are here, their capacities are strengthened, they are well trained in flour production, I think they can take over.
In the village of Fuchi, 120 kilometers from Maradi, the economic capital of Niger, the World Food Programme is combating the risk of famine. Salifu Nasiru is in charge of training rural communities to adopt techniques that promote agriculture that is less dependent on the rainy season. Climate change remains the main challenge in the region.
As soon
as the rainy season ends, many losses are recorded due to the lack of rain and the invasion of desert locusts. But off-season crops have provided some relief for farmers during the lean season.
As soon as the rainy season ends, many losses are recorded due to the lack of rain and the desert locust invasion. However, off-season crops have provided some relief for farmers during the lean season. In June 2022, food insecurity reached its predicted peak and affected at least 4 million people across Niger. In a context of the withdrawal of humanitarian organizations, finding endogenous solutions to food insecurity seems urgent for Niger.
A report by WADR's Niamey correspondent Murtala Zubairu, voiced by Eche Atisu.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Our guest is the regional representative for the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Robert Kochani, who elaborates on his agency's call to the Senegalese government approach as it sets out to review the controversial amnesty law. This call was made during a high-level meeting organized by the National Human Rights Commission of Senegal. Now, the UN Office welcomes peace and reconciliation, but Robert Kochani insists that perpetrators of human rights violations should be held accountable.
The whole idea of holding this brainstorming session today is to bring about scholars, civil society organizations, human rights defenders, and all other persons, resource persons, from academics, to look at the amnesty law that was adopted by the outgoing regime of President Sall last year, 2024. Look at the implications of the law, because the society in Senegal is divided over that law, and the Prime Minister Sonko himself publicly said the law was to be reviewed. So the purpose of the meeting is for the Commission to play its role of advisory body set up by the state of Senegal, gather people who can have a say on the law, share experiences of such situations that have happened elsewhere in the world, and come up with some concrete advice to give to the public powers, to the government, if you want, and also maybe parliament and all other institutions, to ensure that while we uphold national reconciliation, peace and stability, we do not have attitude that will pave the law for impunity. Considering that there are victims, government itself in 2024 released a white book in which they acknowledged a number of people killed by security operatives. There are people who have been wounded. Some have lost the use of some organs for life. There have been public and private good that was destroyed. You need to ensure that the amnesty law is not perceived or used to pave the way for impunity, so that reparations are awarded to those who are entitled to it. And also, it serves, the fight against impunity serves as a deterrent for other security operatives or any other person who might want to venture into, killing civilians in the future.
We understand that this law will be reviewed next month before Parliament. What sort of recommendations would you have, or what would you suggest, let's say, the Parliament to do? Because the President of the Human Rights Commission of Senegal was calling for dialogue between, let's say, the Parliament and the Constitutional Court, so that they can find a way forward.
In one word, the amnesty law should not be used to let a police officer or a gendarmerie officer who has killed with no reason with his rifle demonstrators to just walk free and think that he or she can do it again at the next occasion. So using the human rights-based approach in all the discussions surrounding this amnesty law, whether it's going to be abrogated, modified, or what, is in the hand of government with parliament. But for us, since we have that role of advisory, we are telling them, please, there are some principles at the international level in human rights. There are principles at the regional level in human rights. And you, as the Senegalese state, you have ratified a number of instruments at the international and regional level that compels you to make sure that any action you take at the national level does not have an adverse bearing on human rights. Otherwise, can you exclude that somebody may waylay a police officer and take justice into his hands if he or she thinks that this is the one who killed my brother and he's free? I'm going to take his life. We don't want that, because that cannot favor social cohesion. At the end of the day, indeed, there will be a document that will regroup all the recommendations to be addressed to the public powers.
Robert Kochani is the regional representative for the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. In the sporting world, the Confederation of African Football CAF has awarded the Egyptian Football Federation EFA and the Egyptian government the right to host the CAF Under-20 Africa Cup of Nations 2025. This is subsequent to CAF having been informed by the Ivorian Football Federation (FIF) and the government of Cote d'Ivoire that due to unforeseen circumstances, they are unable to host CAF Under-20 Africa Cup of Nations 2025. This comes barely a month to the opening match of the tournament on 27 April 2025. No further details surrounding Cote d'Ivoire's failure to host the competition were given, but the Egyptian Football Federation and the Egyptian government had previously submitted a bid to host CAF Under-20 Africa Cup of Nations. However, the competition was awarded to Cote d'Ivoire, who now informed CAF that it can no longer host the youth tournament. Egypt, with its ready-made infrastructure, will host the game. The opening match of the CAF Under-20 Africa Cup of Nations 2025 will be played on Sunday, 27 April 2025, and the final on May 18, 2025. And African football stars are set to be in action in their previous clubs around Europe as club football returns following the international break. Superstars like Nigeria's Victor Osimhen, Ghana's Thomas Partey, and Senegal's Sadio Mane will be in action this weekend. That's how we wrap up this edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Maodo Juve, Sheikh Njai, and Mam Kodu Fai for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via social media platforms: X, Instagram at WADR English, on Facebook, WADR English Service, and stream live on WADR.org. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is our security and governance program in English in the Sahel, to be followed by the news brief in French at 7 p.m. I'm Abdullahi Hassan. Good evening.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, Newmi FM 94.0,
Hilltop Radio 104.7 FM,
and